In early June 1942, the Pacific Ocean trembled under the weight of uncertainty. Just 6 months had passed since the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the United States Navy was still reeling from the blow. Across thousands of miles of blue, scattered islands served as fragile stepping stones of defense and communication. One of these outposts, small and isolated, was Midway Island, a tiny coral atoll that stood as the last American shield before Hawaii. Intelligence from Station Hypo in Hawaii, under the command of Commander Joseph Rockefort, had begun to suggest that Japan was planning something enormous. The Japanese fleet, still confident after months of sweeping victories, was moving eastward, but where and when it would strike remained a mystery. Every whisper of radio traffic, every intercepted code, hinted that Midway could be the target, yet proof was desperately needed. The stakes were monumental. Control of Midway meant control of the Central Pacific, a strategic crossroads for aircraft and naval operations. If Japan succeeded, the American presence in the Pacific could collapse, opening the way for attacks on Hawaii itself. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, understood that information, not firepower, would determine the coming battle. Without reliable reconnaissance, even the most powerful fleet could be blind. Enter the Consolidated PBY Catalina, a strange-looking aircraft that seemed far from glamorous. With its broad wings, twin engines, and boat-like fuselage, the Catalina was slow, unarmored, and often dismissed as obsolete. But it carried something far more valuable than speed and endurance. Capable of flying over 2,500 miles and staying aloft for more than 20 hours, it could patrol vast stretches of the Pacific Ocean, searching for the elusive movements of enemy ships. As tension mounted in early June, dozens of PBY Catalinas fanned out from Midway and Pearl Harbor. Their crews were young, often in their early 20s, and their missions demanded not only skill but incredible patience. They flew low and slow over empty water for hours, scanning the endless horizon through binoculars. Many returned with nothing, but one would not. The world was on the verge of one of the most pivotal moments in modern military history, and the men aboard those flying boats were about to change it forever. In the dim morning light of June 4, 1942, Lieutenant Howard Ott and his crew lifted off from Midway in their PBY Catalina. The Pacific stretched beneath them like a vast, indifferent mirror. Their mission was simple but perilous: find the Japanese fleet before it found them. The Catalinas were the eyes of the Pacific Fleet, their patrols covering thousands of miles of empty ocean where danger could appear at any moment. 80's aircraft skimmed the waves at a few hundred feet, its engines droning steadily, its crew tense and alert. For hours, they saw nothing. The monotony was broken only by the rhythmic hum of the engines and the occasional burst of radio static. Then, shortly after 5:30 in the morning, Ott spotted something, a thin plume of black smoke rising on the horizon. He banked the Catalina toward it. As they drew closer, the distant smudge resolved into shapes, ships, many ships. Through the haze, Ott and his crew counted carriers, cruisers, and destroyers sailing in tight formation. It was the Imperial Japanese Navy's first carrier striking force, led by Vice Admiral Kiichi Nagamo. The moment was electric. The PBY's radio operator transmitted a contact report that would change the course of the war. Many enemy planes heading Midway, bearing 320. Distance 150. Those words reached Admiral Nimitz's headquarters and confirmed what American intelligence had suspected. The Japanese fleet was indeed attacking Midway. 80's Catalina did not turn for home. Instead, he and his crew shadowed the enemy for hours, risking everything. Japanese Zero fighters patrolled the skies, and every moment in range was a test of courage. The Catalina was slow and easy to spot, but it stayed on course, tracking the fleet's movements so the U.S. Navy could position its own carriers, the USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and USS Yorktown, for a surprise counterattack. When the battle erupted later that day, American dive bombers, guided by the intelligence gathered by those PBY flights, struck the Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. Within hours, the tide of the Pacific War had turned. The Japanese advance was stopped cold. Midway became a symbol of balance restored, and behind that victory stood a slow, lumbering aircraft that had seen the enemy first. While history would remember the explosions, the fire, and the triumph, the battle's true turning point had occurred hours before the first bomb fell, when a PBY Catalina spotted smoke on the horizon and refused to look away. Before the PBY Catalina became a legend, it was simply a tool, a practical answer to the U.S. Navy's need for a long-range patrol aircraft. Developed by Consolidated Aircraft in the late 1930s, the PBY, short for patrol bomber, was designed to endure. Its broad wings stretched over 100 feet, its twin engines gave it stability, and its hull-like fuselage allowed it to land on both sea and land. With a cruising speed of about 120 miles per hour, it was no match for Japanese Zero fighters. Yet its genius lay not in combat, but in endurance and versatility. The Catalina could fly over 20 hours without refueling. It could carry bombs, depth charges, or torpedoes, but its greatest weapon was its ability to search, to see further than any ship or submarine could. Its retractable wing-mounted floats gave it balance on rough seas, and its glazed nose provided unparalleled visibility for observers scanning the ocean. It was in every sense a flying lifeline. The aircraft's missions went far beyond reconnaissance. Catalinas conducted night bombing runs, anti-submarine patrols, and search and rescue operations across every ocean. They were the aircraft that found survivors drifting in lifeboats after naval battles. They delivered mail, carried medical supplies, and ferried wounded soldiers from remote islands to safety. In the Philippines, in the Aleutians, and across the South Pacific, the PBY's slow silhouette became a sign of hope. At Midway, Catalinas even performed one of the earliest coordinated torpedo attacks by American aircraft. On June 3, 1942, hours before the main battle, a PBY from Patrol Squadron 24 struck a Japanese tanker with a torpedo, one of the first successful air-launched torpedo hits by the U.S. Navy in the Pacific War. Though often overlooked, these missions proved that the Catalina could deliver decisive results even when outmatched. The crews called it the Cat. The Japanese called it the Black Cat when it flew night missions, painted entirely in matte black to avoid detection. Its crews embraced the nickname with pride. They flew through storms, darkness, and enemy fire, guided only by dead reckoning and instinct. The PBY Catalina was not built to dazzle, it was built to endure, and in a war that spanned thousands of miles of ocean, endurance was everything. When the faster aircraft had to turn back, the Catalina kept flying. When the sun went down, the Catalina took off again. And when the war finally turned in America's favor, it was because this patient, persistent flying boat had done what no one else could. It watched the ocean without blinking. For the men who flew the PBY Catalina, war was not measured in explosions or dogfights, but in endless hours of sky and sea. A typical patrol could last 20 hours or more, with no radio chatter, no visible horizon, and no guarantee of return. Inside the aircraft, the air was thick with oil fumes, coffee, and sweat. The sound of the engines never stopped, a deep, steady rumble that became part of their thoughts. The crew of 9 shared a bond forged in exhaustion and trust. Each man depended on the others to keep the flying boat alive. There was little glamour in their missions. Meals were often cans of Vienna sausages, crackers, and the occasional cup of instant coffee brewed on a small hot plate clamped to the floor. The radio man might use the time to clean his equipment. The navigator, hunched over a chart table lit by a single lamp, would plot their position using stars when the weather allowed. The bow gunner kept watch through the blister window, eye scanning for anything that broke the endless horizon, a ship, a submarine's wake, or the faint glint of metal. When enemy aircraft appeared, the Catalina's crew knew they could not rely on speed to escape. Instead, they used the clouds, the sea spray, and luck. Many times, the PBY limped home riddled with bullet holes, fuel tanks leaking, and engines coughing. Some never made it back. Yet for every loss, There were stories of courage that spread quietly among the crews, men who stayed with wounded comrades until rescue arrived, pilots who landed on rough seas to pull survivors from the water, and navigators who guided crippled planes home using only instinct and starlight.